KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Brad Turner, in today for Erin O'Toole. A plan to transform high-rise office space and reduce the housing shortage. It's an idea researchers are proposing for the Denver metro area. Denver is one of many American cities with a tight housing market and a glut of unused office space. A recent study by the Pew Charitable Trusts and the architecture firm Gensler calls for converting high-rise offices to shared residential spaces similar to a college dorm. Tenants would share kitchens, bathrooms, and workspaces with people in neighboring units.
What we're talking about here is micro units. We're talking about something in the neighborhood of 120 to 180 square feet.
That's Alex Horowitz. He oversaw the study for the Pew Charitable Trusts. Alex thinks these low-cost, dorm-style units and skyscrapers could help cities where attainable housing is hard to find, and even dramatically reduce the rate of homelessness in the U.S. Just 5 years ago, this would have seemed like a crazy idea, but COVID really cleared out a lot of office space in downtown areas. Give us a sense of the severity of the imbalance between available office space to the shortage of housing in Denver.
In Denver, there is real housing scarcity. Colorado has seen an influx of residents in recent years, and that's been going on for well over a decade now, that there's been just a lot of demand to move into Colorado, but the state has not been adding enough housing to keep up with that demand, and so rents have soared. Housing costs have soared. The median rent in Denver is close to $1,800 now. And in the US, rents are at an all-time high, and housing costs to buy a home are at an all-time high as well. But the US has a record office vacancy rate of around 20%. And in downtown Denver, that figure is closer to 30%.
So there are many cities in the U.S. where the supply of office space outweighs the current demand. What made you want to look at this issue in Denver particularly?
So there's a lot of appetite among policymakers, among the public for office to residential conversions as a way to deal with the housing shortage, because frankly, we've got a glut of existing office space, more than 1 billion square feet in the U.S., but the housing shortage in the U.S. is severe, between 4 and 7 million homes. So look, it's natural to think that converting offices to housing, to apartments makes sense, and it does, but the costs have just been prohibitive, more than $400 per square foot in conversion costs, and that makes the units just too expensive. But we had an idea, what if we converted these buildings into dorm-style housing? And it turns out that shaves a good 25 to 35% off construction costs, but this isn't allowed in most cities. Denver is one of the few where it is.
So we've heard for a while the idea of converting office space to apartments. The innovation here is converting it to dorm-style housing instead.
Exactly. So in the building that we looked at in Denver, you could get about 14 apartments per floor with a normal apartment layout. But with micro units, you can get 44.
Wow. So
it triples the potential housing supply, but it dramatically shrinks the cost per unit. Those 44 apartments would be affordable to somebody earning a fairly low income.
The residential units you're proposing for these skyscrapers share kitchen, bathroom, and workspaces. Give me a picture of what one of these residential units looks like, because that's key to how you make them affordable.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a typical unit in Denver in the prototype would be about 7.5 feet wide by about 20 feet deep. And it would have a large window because office buildings have large windows. And then the interior, you'd have multiple living rooms. You'd have a mix of individual bathrooms and office-style bathrooms, washers, dryers, laundry area, 4 separate eat-in kitchens that people could use for when they want a stove or an oven or just for social reasons, because every unit would have a half-size refrigerator, a microwave, a desk, a closet, a pantry, dresser. And so we anticipate people would, primarily live in their units just like they do with regular apartments, but there's this interior social space.
And you're proposing charging about $850 a month for this. That's pretty competitive in Denver.
That's right. And so in a city like Denver, where the median rent's close to $1,800, This would be less than half of that. And that includes utilities and wouldn't require a full security deposit of a month's rent.
Having a high-rise view of the Rocky Mountains to the west sounds pretty appealing.
It does. And also just the location of this housing, because look, the vacant office buildings are concentrated in downtowns. That means that somebody could get by without a car. And transportation costs are often the second biggest line item in a household's budget after housing. So enabling housing where people don't have to drive, or they don't have to own a car, or they don't have to drive much, and they can walk places, they can bike, they can use transit, that's pretty attractive. Because look, our housing stock is built for a nation that has large household sizes, and we don't. 63% of American households have one or two people in them.
What kind of feedback have you gotten when you've shared this plan with city officials in Denver?
City officials are excited about it. So to build a studio apartment affordable to a low-income resident is going to require about $300,000 in subsidies. And the subsidies required for one of these micro units converted from an office building would only be $23,000. So you could get 13 homes for the same cost using this model as you could with a new build studio apartment.
We have focused on Denver in this conversation, but Colorado has a housing shortage in plenty of suburbs and mountain towns. What ideas from this high-rise proposal might help smaller towns address their housing shortages?
So micro units don't require large buildings. It would be possible to use a commercial site if zoning allows it, or if the state passes a law to make that more feasible, where, say, you're using a surface parking lot or you're using an old big box store. And micro units could work on a site like that because their development costs are so much lower than studio apartments, because putting the plumbing in the center of the floor saves sharply on costs. And so does the smaller unit size. Look, it was only about 50 years ago that the US had almost no homelessness. And the reason is because we had a lot of low-cost housing available at that time. It was usually called single-room occupancies, or SROs. This is much nicer than that. This is like an upscale college dorm. It's like bringing back the same idea of some shared housing and of enabling housing that just doesn't cost very much to build or to live in, but is of decent quality and in a good location.
Wow, so you're taking some old ideas and mixing them with the reality of the current real estate landscape.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because the homelessness rates seen in a state like Colorado are just dramatically higher than homelessness in states that have inexpensive housing available. So we see adding micro units as a very effective and quick solution that could reduce homelessness, because anytime you add a lot of low-cost housing to a market, homelessness goes down.
Alex Horowitz of the Pew Charitable Trusts studied converting high-rise office space into small residential housing units. We'll put a link to his study in the show notes. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Brad Turner. Thanks for listening.